Okay, first graphic, hazardous weather graphic here showing winter storm and blizzard warnings out, Nunivak Island, Kuskokwim Delta, Yukon Delta, St. Lawrence Island, Bering Strait coast, all of Norton Sound there, including the south coast of the Seward Peninsula here. And that's for heavy snow and blowing snow here moving in later tonight into the area, actually late this evening here on the southwest coast, but coming in tonight there. And then also for tonight, winter weather advisories out for Bristol Bay, the Kuskokwim Valley, the lower and mid-Yukon River Valley areas, including the Galena area there. And that's for snow and blowing snow with visibility reduced to about a half mile at times, and significant snowfall occurring in these areas. Could be some freezing rain late tonight and tomorrow here over the Bristol Bay area. And farther to the east, out for actually tomorrow, we've got a winter storm watch tomorrow and tomorrow night out for the Kenai Peninsula and western Prince William Sound for possible heavy snow and blowing snow there, and also over the Panhandle, including the eastern North Gulf Coast, Yakutat, all the way down toward Dixon Entrance, the exception being Prince of Wales Island. No advisors or watches out there, but that's for heavy snow coming in tomorrow night, tomorrow evening actually, and continuing through the day on Wednesday. So from there, moving on to satellite imagery, not too bad. Still some snow showers down over the southern Panhandle lasting into at least late afternoon. Ketchikan still reporting some light snow, as was, I believe, Petersburg, farther to the north, but clearing out as you head even farther north and colder temperatures. North Gulf Coast into the Gulf of Alaska, lots of sunshine today up across south central Alaska and even into the interior. And pretty clear skies even into the areas up toward the Brooks Range. Pick up some clouds on the Arctic coast. And then out to the west here, the next system, low center farther back out here to the west, but you can see clouds pushing in toward the southwest coast. It's mostly mid and high level clouds through here, kind of breaking up the heavier precipitation producing clouds right about there, extending back to the Pribilofs with some light snow and winds gusting to 50 miles an hour at St. Paul today, and then that extending down in the form of rain to the eastern Aleutians, mixture of rain or snow coming into the Alaska Peninsula, extending all the way back out toward Adak. They picked up about half an inch of rainfall with winds gusting up to about 50 miles an hour, with the front just edging past them now, and then another system out there towards Shimia, kind of a double low center with this one here and then another one there, this one mostly aloft. And otherwise, we'll see this again up on the Arctic coast. Not a lot going on. Still some clouds here and a little bit of light precipitation there. Another batch right through there, just bringing flying conditions down. And the snow showers continuing down here over the southern Panhandle due to that low. Slow to move, but starting to drift off farther to the southeast there in toward the Queen Charlotte Islands, moving into western British Columbia. But lots of clear skies, high pressure over the central interior, keeping winds light and temperatures cold, and a lot of good sunshine here from Kenai Peninsula areas, Kodiak Island, right on up into the interior there. And then the snow starting to move into Nunivak Island here, Makoriak, not quite up to St. Lawrence Island yet. And then the warm front right through here. South of the warm front, rain, warmer temperatures, gusty winds, eastern Aleutians into the western Alaska Peninsula. And then that ending behind the front there. And then some pretty good storm force winds with gusts of 65 miles an hour wrapping in around the bottom side of this low there into the western Aleutians. But for tonight, that will drop off dramatically here over the western Aleutians Aleutians, even the central Aleutians will see pretty light winds as a whole storm system pulls to the north near St. Matthew Island. And rain and snow showers behind the front here, eastern Aleutians of the Pribilos. But again, snow and blowing snow pushing inland here into the western interior valleys, trying to push in toward Tanana late tonight, but the snow and blowing snow pushing up across the Seward Peninsula. Increase in the clouds after midnight, south central Alaska here, Kenai Peninsula. Chance of snow making landfall on Kodiak Island after midnight, mostly down toward AKwx, Sitkinak, maybe getting up into Kodiak State Airport by daybreak tomorrow. Mostly clear skies here over the Copper River Basin. Eastern North Gulf Coast stays fair over the Panhandle. Most of the shower activity now ending, and on down to the south with just dry conditions and pretty cold temperatures in the area tonight. Winds a little gusty still through Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay there in the north. Otherwise light winds for the Arctic coast with just some variable amounts of clouds. And then moving on, forecast for Tuesday, tomorrow, big area of snow and blowing snow progressing eastward here into the central interior areas. Snow and blowing snow pushing across south central Alaska with the winter storm watch out for the Kenai Peninsula, western Prince William Sound. In fact, chance of snow getting over toward Yakutat late in the afternoon, actually reaching the eastern border here again late in the afternoon, but having trouble getting north of the Brooks Range there. Just look for an increase in the mid and high level clouds for the north slope out to the Arctic coast, but snow and gusty winds. Mostly snow showers here over the northern Bering Sea. Another development down here just south of the Alaska Peninsula, and the front just south of the peninsula there, so it should be a little bit chillier air, so back down with, or freezing levels come back down, pushing the snowfall level back down towards sea level there, and that extends all the way out to the Komodorski, so snow showers covering all of the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. High pressure holding on for at least a little longer there for the Panhandle for another dry day with some partly to mostly sunny skies, increasing clouds in the afternoon. That gets replaced by snow and blowing snow partly by tomorrow evening coming in and tomorrow night, and maybe some rain, Prince of Wales Island in the afternoon on Wednesday, otherwise still snow, and gusty northwest winds, some snow and blowing snow, Kodiak Island. Snow covering, or chance of snow covers just about all of interior Alaska from the Brooks Range southward to the Gulf of Alaska and westward into the Bering Sea. And actually, let me back that up. This low here really weakens. This low tracks north, too far back. There we go. This low tracks northeastward to this position, and this is the old low here pulling back to the west-northwest toward Norton Sound and weakening there to about 982 millibars. And then yet another system coming into the western Aleutians out here with more gale force winds, rain, and snow coming in with that feature late on Wednesday. Otherwise, for Tuesday morning, lows 20 to 30 below in the Copper River Basin, anywhere from 5 below to maybe 15, possibly 20 below here over south central Alaska tonight, around 10 for Nome. Lower 20s, Kodiak Island, and 5 to 10 for the lows, Bristol Bay, 5 to 15 below in the Kuskokwim Valley. Southeast coast, single numbers, 0 to 10 above in the north there, and in the teens elsewhere. So everybody even under 20 degrees, about 8 for Yakutat. And then the highs tomorrow, 30 to 35, central and southern southeast coast, and in the 20s to the north, upper 20s for the North Gulf Coast. Temperatures rising up to about 10 degrees or so for the Copper River Basin, 15 to 20 northern Cook Inlet into the Manauskas-Susitna Valley, otherwise 20 to 30 for the Kenai Peninsula for the highs tomorrow, near 40 Kodiak Island, 35 to or mid to upper 30s for Bristol Bay, and highs 10 to 20 for the Kuskokwim Valley. Lows Wednesday morning staying above 0, so much warmer conditions with the clouds and precipitation coming in. Still down into the teens, much as south central Alaska, but staying above 0 everywhere else. And the lower 20s, Bristol Bay near 30, Kodiak Island. Mid-teens, northern Panhandle, 20s to near 30 elsewhere. And for the highs on Wednesday, lower 30s north and near 40 south, in the 20s south central Alaska, Bristol Bay, mid-30s Kodiak Island up to the north, lows 25 to 40 below over the interior tonight out to the Arctic coast, followed by highs right around 0 in the central interior, below 0 up to the north, and about 10 out to the west, followed by lows back below 0, St. Lawrence Island, Seward Peninsula, and right around 0 for the Fairbanks area, followed by highs 5 to 10 or so, maybe a little warmer than that. Lower teens for the eastern interior, below 0 from the Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast. And out to the west here, we've got lows tonight, 5 to 15 along the coast, upper 20s for the Pribilofs, otherwise upper 30s there for Alaska, and upper 20s out toward Shimia. Highs near freezing here toward Shimia and Attu, upper 30s Adak and Atka, lower 40s on Alaska Island into the Alaska Peninsula, otherwise mid-30s for the Pribilofs, and then highs right around freezing here for the southwest coast, but up above freezing in Bristol Bay. And then for Wednesday morning, upper 20s for the Aleutians, and for the Pribilofs, lower 20s, right around 30 there for the Fox Islands, and mid-20s to near 30 for the Bristol Bay area, followed by highs 30 to 40.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
IFR, the next storm, rolling right into the southwest interior later tonight and into Tuesday morning early, back down across Kodiak Island, back to the Alaska Peninsula. A lot of VFR now behind that system over the Aleutian southern Bering Sea, good VFR over the interior, as well as most of the Panhandle. And for the afternoon, VFR, all of the southeast coast. Marginal VFR creeping into Yakutat late in the day, but IFR right on its heels, covering the North Gulf Coast by the afternoon or into the latter part of the afternoon, as far east as across the Copper River Basin, up to the Alaska Range, still down to Kodiak Island there, and then the front right through here, so improving behind that, becoming marginal VFR for the Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, and the VFR getting over the Fox Islands. IFR, northern Bering Sea, northward through the Straits, Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound to Kotzebue Sound, and eastward into the Koyukuk Valley. North Slope Arctic Coast, still VFR. For the day Wednesday morning, IFR over the northern interior and Bering Sea continues, having trouble getting north of the Brooks Range there, so staying pretty good out along the Arctic coast. Southeast interior, IFR all the way up to just north of Eagle, down into the Gulf of Alaska, and the Panhandle IFR just about all the way down to Dixon Entrance, VFR for Kodiak Island and Bristol Bay, and not too bad here for the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. An area of marginal VFR there over the Pribilofs in north central Bering Sea. That improves, kind of just disappears there by Wednesday afternoon. Next weaker system here bringing some IFR into the southwest Bering, just grazing the Aleutians. Lingering IFR there along the Alaska Peninsula, southern Bristol Bay. Bigger area here over the western part of the state, up across the Brooks Range into the North Slope now, and then down into the eastern interior. Some VFR working on up through Cook Inlet into the southern Susitna Valley and possibly the Matanuska Valley. Bristol or Prince William Sound VFR, and the Panhandle all VFR. Passes tomorrow, one more VFR day coming up, but in the afternoon for both Atigan and Anatuvik and Atigan, ceilings visibilities will start to come down, especially the ceilings. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR. IFR for rainy, big change from today for the Alaska Range passes, windy IFR. Isabel, deteriorating conditions throughout the day, becoming IFR in the afternoon. That same trend for Montesta as well. And for Tanita, IFR. Portage, IFR. Chilkoot and White, one more day of VFR flying for those two passes. And coming out to the freezing levels at the surface here, southern Kenai Peninsula, right across the northern Panhandle, and then much warmer air sliding up ahead of that system with a southerly flow. So we've got 6,000 to 8,000 feet now right over the Alaska Peninsula and 2,000 feet up to the Pribilofs cutting across Bristol Bay. And icing, with all that moisture coming in, a huge area of isolated moderate rime icing, otherwise light, here coming into the interior, all the way over toward Yakutat late in the day, extending back over the northern Bering Sea, southward to the Pribilofs, and then for the Alaska Peninsula as well, and then less of a threat out here over the Aleutians and southern Bering Sea. Looking at the jet stream, pretty good southwest jet, up to 185 knots here along the Aleutian Range and into the eastern Bristol Bay. tracks northward and takes a turn to the east here, 170 knots into Canada, diving south-southeast, 120 knots right over Glacier Bay. And at 9,000 feet, again, good southwest flow, both over the Bering Sea, west turning southwest, pushing that moisture right on in, up to 60 knots there, and about 50 knots even over the Copper River Basin. Less flow, lighter winds over the Panhandle and on up to the north. And fourth, 3,000 feet for Tuesday. Westerly flow, southern Bering Sea, west-northwesterlies, 40 to 45 knots. Strong westerly, 60 knots right into the southwest coast. Turn it around to east, 50 to 65 knots there up over the northwest part of the state. Lighter winds to the east here, but a pretty good southwest wind turning south at 55 knots with this system there near Kodiak Island. Turbulence, quite an area of moderate turbulence tomorrow over much of the western interior from the Brooks Range right on down to Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, up into Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula. Not too bad for the Panhandle, pretty smooth from Yakutat on down. Back to the west, though, the Aleutians, at some point in the day tomorrow, looks like it'll be pretty choppy conditions there from eastern Aleutians all the way out to Chimianatu.
Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining us once again is our good friend Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. Thanks again for joining us, Eric. We really appreciate it, as always.
Happy to be here, Dave.
Thanks. And, you know, we're going to ask you some more satellite questions here, but, you know, since you're a regular guest, we're going to give you a riddle this time, kind of a trick start to the show. How do you see a polar bear in a snowstorm?
Sounds like a challenging question because the polar bear is white and the snowstorm's white. How do you do that? Well, in the world of satellite meteorology, you couldn't, because the spatial resolution of this instrument that we're going to talk about today has 375 meters resolution, and even the most well-fed polar bear will not be 375 meters across.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to run into such a creature, would you? In the satellite meteorology world, the equivalent would be, how do you tell the difference between clouds and then an area that has no clouds but's covered by snow, a piece of ocean that has no clouds but has sea ice? All three of these are white. The snow, the clouds, the sea ice, it's all white. So how, using satellite data, can you tell someone where the clouds are and where the clear areas are? This is important for aviators. Mariners want to know, in the ocean there, this white stuff, is that sea ice or is that just a cloud? How do we tell the difference? And it turns out, if you look, say, at a picture of Alaska from the springtime, March or April, and it's high noon, so we're getting a lot of sunshine. If you were riding on a satellite with your human eye, look down, everything's white. And we've got a picture of Alaska from early April, and we're seeing some of the lower elevations in south central Alaska are melting out, getting some brown ground there, but otherwise there's a whole lot of white on the image. What areas are cloudy, but what areas are clear and covered by snow or ice? It turns out that if we leave the visible spectrum behind a little bit. See, a satellite has multiple channels in the electromagnetic spectrum that it can look at. Part of that's visible light, what we see as humans, but there's a lot going on at other wavelengths. If we add in something that's called near infrared, what we couldn't quite see, but we're getting into that infrared territory, there's a magical property that we can exploit.
Secrets to find.
Oh yeah. This is actually powerful and almost magical. That at a slightly longer wavelength, when the sun shines down on Alaska and then it bounces off back to the satellite, at that near infrared wavelength, it turns out that snow and ice will absorb that wavelength, but liquid water, like liquid droplets in a cloud, will reflect it back. And that's not the way it works in visible. You know, visible, it just bounces off of all those targets the same. But at near infrared, snow and ice absorbs it, and the liquid will reflect it back. Liquid cloud droplets will do that. And so an image where everything looks white suddenly becomes colorful. And the way this recipe works is that the clouds look pink, and the snow-covered ground and the ice-covered ocean look blue. Suddenly now, we're able to see the polar bear in the snowstorm. We're able to see where the clouds are and where the snow is and where the ice is. This is a powerful advantage. Consider the case zooming into the Bering Strait area. What if you were asked to brief a pilot who wanted to fly, say, from Kotzebue down to Savoonga or Gamble, and had to fly VFR, visual flight rules, so they had to stay out of the clouds? Could you use a satellite image where everything is white to provide that pilot any guidance?
It'd be pretty tricky.
Very tricky. And that's why we have to go to this other recipe where the all-white polar bear in the snowstorm becomes more colorful. And now we can tell the pilot, aha, this is a cloud you want to stay out of, but over here, sure, it looks white in the visible spectrum, but what we're doing, we'll show you, oh, this is just snow-covered ground, but it's clear, so you can fly right through there, visual flight rules. Same thing for a mariner who might want to get down to St. Lawrence Island, say, but has to avoid the sea ice. This product has applicability there as well.
Wonderful.
It's an amazing new technology, so many new channels. The satellite that makes this imagery actually has 22 different channels that it looks at.
22 secret decoder rings.
22 secret decoder rings.
Okay. You know, I liken this to an activity I had in the car when I was growing up. We go on long car rides, and we do all the work in these activity books to, you know, stay calm, cool, and collected for our parents who were trying to get us across the state. But to get the answer, the real answer, you had to apply that red sheet to see the answer or the secret path or whatever the message was in that activity book to get you onto the next page. And it's also like a photography filter, right? If you're taking a lot of pictures, you can apply different colors to see different parts of that image. I mean, that sounds a lot like what you're talking about.
Oh, you know it. The information is in there all along. We just have to combine the channels in a way to reveal what's in there. And by the way, you're dating yourself. So you didn't have an iPad in the back of the car?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, we have, lastly, for dessert, there's a great image of this same kind of recipe. We're looking at South Central Alaska the first week of January. In first week of January, the sun, even at noon, is really low on the horizon, barely up. And in this image, the fun thing is the shadow of Denali. We can see the shadow of Denali over a lower pink cloud deck.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Denali at 20,000 feet casts a big shadow. So this is another, just for fun, kind of application here. This is called multispectral satellite imagery, and it's the future. And happily, the future is now.
Oh, that is fascinating. And 22 different secrets that can be revealed from just one satellite tool that's floating overhead. Eric, thanks so much for joining us again. We can't wait to have you back and telling us more secrets of satellite technology that are passing over us every single day, many times a day, over Alaska, and helping us all the way in many different parts of our lives. So thanks so much for joining us again.
Well, happy to be here.
All right. And thank you for staying with us. We'll be back with a little more weather here in just a few minutes. And of course, we'll have more Alaska weather facts anytime online.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Coastal water forecast here for the south coast. Tuesday, north winds 15 to 20 knots. Up on the north coast, east to north winds 10 to 15 knots. And gale warnings still out for Lynn Canal, north winds 35 knots. With Stevens Passage looking at north winds at 25. Clarence Strait, northwest down to 15 knots with seas only at 3 feet. And then for Wednesday, with that next big storm coming in, we've got gales developing on the south coast. From the south up to 40 knots. Storm warnings on the north coast. South winds increasing 45 to 50 knots. In Clarence Strait, gale warnings. Southeast winds increasing to 40 knots in the afternoon with seas building to 13 feet. South winds 30 knots for Stevens Passage and Lynn Canal with seas running 5 to 6 feet. And Prince William Sound, Tuesday, northeast winds at 20 knots, seas at about 4 feet. East and southeast winds 30 knots for the North Gulf Coast with 5 to 7 foot seas. And the Barren Islands, gale warnings tomorrow, southeast winds at 40 knots. And for Southern Cook Inlet, Kamishak Bay, small craft advisories, east and northeast winds at 30 knots. Northeast winds at 25 knots for Northern Cook Inlet. And then for Northern Cook Inlet on Wednesday, those winds down to 15 knots, sea subsiding to 3 feet. But gale warnings here for Southern Cook Inlet. West winds 35 knots, seas 8 feet. Kamishak Bay, west winds 40 knots with seas 14 feet. Barren Islands, west winds 45 knots, and storm warnings for the western North Gulf Coast. On Wednesday, northwest winds 50 knots, west winds 45 knots for the eastern North Gulf Coast. And Prince William Sound, north winds at 30 knots with seas at 7 feet. Kodiak Island tomorrow, east-southeast winds 20 to 30 knots, south 30-knot winds in the forecast for Bristol Bay, and the Alaska Peninsula, southwest 30 to 40 knots, seas up to 18 feet. And for Wednesday, west winds 45 knots for the Alaska Peninsula with seas 21 to 22 feet. Good gales in Bristol Bay out of the west at 40 knots, seas 15 feet there. And gale warnings for Kodiak Island, west winds up to 45 knots. Eastern Aleutians tomorrow, west-southwest winds at 25 knots. Adak and Atka, west-northwest at 30 to 35 knots. And then gale warnings for the western Aleutians for west winds at 40 knots. All these winds coming down in the late afternoon. And for Wednesday, storm warnings over the western Aleutians. Southwest winds 45 to 50 knots. West-southwest 40 knots here for the central Aleutians. And for the eastern Aleutians, gale warnings to storm warnings for west-southwest winds 40 to 50 knots. And for the southwest coast, south to southwest winds at 45 knots tomorrow. Northeast winds 40 knots for St. Lawrence Island. Norton Sound, east winds at 45 knots. Storm warnings for the Pribilof Islands for southwest winds at 50 knots. And for the northern Bering Sea, St. Matthew Island, northwest winds at 40. For the day Wednesday, Pribilof, still windy, west winds of 45 knots, west coast here, southwest coast, west winds of 40 knots. Gales continue for the St. Matthew Island area, 35 knots. Lighter winds for St. Lawrence Island, northwest at 30, and Norton Sound coming down to 20 knots from the east. And gale warnings from Wales to Cape Thompson tomorrow, northeast at 35 knots. Otherwise, the western Arctic coast, east-northeast at 25. East winds 15 for the central coast, and about 20 knots there for the eastern Beaufort Sea coastline. Then brisk wind advisories develop for the next day on Wednesday. We've got east to northeast winds, or east winds here on the east side at 25 to 30 knots. Central and western Arctic coast, northeast at 25 knots, and 25 to 30 knot winds from the north from Cape Beaufort to Wales. For tonight, again, big storm bringing heavy snow and blowing snow into the western interior with snow spreading into the western valleys, Bristol Bay, by morning, and up across the Seward Peninsula. Rain for the eastern Aleutians, the Alaska Peninsula, snow sliding into Kodiak Island, at least the southwest side, late tonight. Increasing clouds, south central Alaska, but continued dry and some clearing here through the central interior. Snow showers finally end over the Panhandle. That continues through tomorrow, but snow and blowing snow advancing into the central interior. Some light snow making the eastern border, but all staying south of the Brooks Range. This system the next day tracks northeastward right into the Gulf of Alaska for another round of snow and blowing snow across southern Alaska to Kodiak Island. This low weakens, keeps snow and blowing snow going out along the west coast with some snow trying to get north of the Brooks Range, but having a little trouble. Snow, blowing snow, and rain for the Panhandle.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.